And now our panel to discuss the clean dream, achieving 30% clean energy by 2025. First, the director of the Department of Energy's Energy Management Program, Unruh. Senior Policy Advisor with Holland and Knight, Beth Viola. The Deputy Director of the Secretary of the Navy's Renewable Energy Program Office, John Kliem. Duke Energy's Vice President and Chief Sustainability Officer, Shawn. And this morning's moderator, the Director of GW Solar Institute, Amit Ronen.
Okay. Welcome back, everybody. I hope everyone's all stretched out. Saw some dance moves there. So we're honored today to have such a high-powered and diverse panel to kick off our today's discussion. We just got a great overview of the executive order, groundbreaking in a lot of ways, and we're going to focus on one specific aspect for this panel. And you heard it from the president himself. How do we get the federal government? And it's specifically a quote here. The total amount of building electric energy consumed by 2025, they want it to be 30% from renewable electric energy. So that's an ambitious target, and we're going to talk about how we get there and some lessons learned from some of the leaders in the federal government in this space. So let's start with Tim. He's been thinking about this and leading federal efforts through as director of FEMP for almost 5 years now. And can you give us a big picture of where we are? You look at across the government and how people are doing. I understand renewables are currently about 10%, almost 10%, according to your website stats. I think those are from 2013, might be a little bit higher. So we got a decade, essentially, to try and triple that number. So can we do it? How do we get there? What have you seen that's working across the government?
So I love the way you round up for me. That's great. We always love that help. We're at 8.8%,
okay,
continuing to grow in 2014 with numbers that we released today. And there really is, to meet the 30% requirement, which means a lot more renewable energy than we have today, there's really an overall holistic approach you have to take that integrates a lot of different aspects. From looking at Department of Energy, overall, just the research and development that has to have for the grid to handle renewable energy, with the Office of Electricity doing that work, as well as with my own energy efficiency renewable energy, the research done to bring the price of renewable energy down. As it gets more and more affordable, we can make more and more progress. But then you look at the implementation side, which is really where the federal agencies get involved more directly. The first approach, oddly enough, is we have to look at efficiency first. Efficiency really needs to be our main driver in order to achieve that reduction, because if we're using less electricity, then that 30% is easier to achieve because we have less to actually install to make that happen. So efficiency often is one of our driving, most cost-effective things that we have to drive first. But when it comes to renewable energy, frankly, the pathways to success tend to be procurement pathways. And procurement tends to be the big gap in the middle that always is the part that we have to figure out how to achieve. We have a lot of different procurement pathways that we can use. We have power purchase agreements. We can install power on site at federal facilities, which actually helps us greatly to achieve that goal, and we get some extra credit when they're on site at federal facilities. But also we have power purchase agreements where we have, I think GSA is one of the leaders in helping us do a pilot program of procuring that power. And I think we're going to hear about the Navy's efforts and their effort procuring that power as well. That becomes a very prominent pathway to help us achieve that goal, is to effectively go out to the market and say, we need new renewable energy. What can you provide us on our particular network connection? But within the federal government, some of the pathways that other agencies can use would be performance contracting. Performance contracting provides an avenue to install renewables. Utility energy service contracts and energy savings performance contracts tend to be a very valid pathway that we can get renewables installed in the federal government. And those particular types of mechanisms can combine that efficiency with the renewable to make an overall cost-effective project that then will help us drive lower use, help us to achieve those goals faster with renewable installations.
All right, good. So 8.8%, there's some mention of the Navy. Actually, some of the videos had the Navy. We're going to hear from your boss, Secretary Mabus, shortly. I don't want you to steal any of his thunder, but tell us a bit about what the Navy is doing. You know, we have a lot of range of where federal agencies, we have this 8.8% overall, but some agencies are in the single digits, some are counting themselves over 100%, I saw on the government statistics. So tell us a little bit, the Navy's got their own goals, how that fits into the executive order. You've been a little bit ahead of the game in terms of putting those goals. What have you learned about how to get there and how easy is it?
Okay, and like Tim said, the key is procurement. That hit the nail right on the head. We've got a very aggressive goal established by the Secretary of the Navy to get 1 gigawatt of renewable energy by this coming December. Produce or procure 1 gigawatt of renewable energy by December. And it's an important goal for us to hit. Because if you think about what the mission of the Navy is, the mission of the Navy is to fight and win our nation's wars and maintain freedom of the sea. In order to do that, we need to operate from a secure environment. We need to have access to reliable and safe power, both at sea and ashore, because those ships need a pier to tie up to. So having energy security is very important to us. And thanks to the Secretary of the Navy, with the 1 gigawatt goal, it's going to change radically the way we manage and distribute energy by integrating renewable energy into the process. Secretary of the Navy then appointed a couple of pretty innovative leaders, Secretary McGinn, who came from ACOR, who knows all about renewable energy, coupled with Mr. Bob Griffin, formerly head of NAVFAC Acquisition, who led the Navy's public-private housing project that privatized our housing. And with those guys, they developed a model, a procurement model, that will enable us to get utility-scale renewable energy on our bases in a way that's better, faster, and cheaper, which really hits on what Tim is trying to get us to do, is to improve the way we procure. And we set up 3 models. I like to think of the models as buy it, book it, and build it. So the first one is the buy it model, and what that is it's an off-base power purchase agreement in that we pay the same price for our electricity that we're currently paying at Brown Power, except it's renewable or it's less over the term of the project. In most cases, we're seeing the net present value of these deals to be on the positive side. So we're saving money by buying renewable energy, and we're integrating renewable energy into the electric requirements of the base. And that's important because as a result of this initiative, we can't have our utility costs go up, because if our utility costs go up, there's not a lot of places we can go to get more money to pay our utility bill. So oftentimes that money has to come out of our operation and maintenance, which means less money for the ships, or it comes out of our facility maintenance account. The next model is the book it model. The book it model is a real estate out grant with a utility partner to bring renewable energy onto our secure base and push that power out to the grid. And in return for that, instead of getting rent payments, we look to get some in-kind consideration projects on the base in the form of energy security projects. The last model is the build it model, and that's your typical on-base power purchase agreement where the power is produced on the base for our consumption. The key for our success is forming strategic partnerships with the utility company and the development community. We work with companies like Duke to form a strategic partnership where we understand what their strategic goals are, they understand what our strategic goals are, and we chart a path forward. We maintain an open dialogue while we create these deals so that it creates a win-win structure. Then we go to the Public Service Commission and bring them into the process so that we can all achieve what our goals are. And in doing so, we found a way to integrate renewable energy into our base electric requirements so that we can change the way we manage and distribute energy and result in renewable energy powering our future.
Great, thanks. Okay, so Beth, follow on to that a little bit. You've been in and out of government for many years. You're a leader in this space and work with a lot of clean energy companies that interact with the government. So let's talk about the economics. We got the largest energy user in the country, trying to get to a third of renewables. How does that work? That's going to cost billions of dollars. What does it mean for the taxpayer? Is this going to cost a lot of money? Where's your take on that? I'm also interested in hearing how that's changed over time, because when you were at CEQ in the Clinton administration, probably the economics might have been very different.
Sure. Things really have changed since the Clinton administration, most notably my hair. But, look, in 1993, when President Clinton signed the first executive order, which created the Federal Environmental Executive, the mission was a little bit different. And it was challenging just to do that executive order, not even so much from a public perception or feedback or pushback we might get, from Congress, but more, could we convince the West Wing that this was worth doing? And I think it was really based on the idea we can lead the charge and save the federal government money. And at that time, the economy was such an important priority, as it is now, as it always is, but especially then, folks over in the West Wing were convinced. But it was not an easy sell even within the building. So, and most of that executive order was primarily focused on efficiency and recycled paper, believe it or not. Mm-hmm. When I went back and looked at our accomplishments book from 2000, on the environment, I have to admit that I was a little bit stunned by our lofty goals, but the reality is we were very successful. In 1993, we said we're gonna move to 30% recyclable, 30% post-consumer recyclable paper, and by 1998, 98% of our paper was recycled. And now you walk into Staples and that's all they sell. But at the time, it was very costly. So my point in saying all of that is that the federal government, by creating, demonstrating that leadership, is creating demand. And that's exactly what's happening on the renewable energy side. So the today very lofty goals of the current executive order are amazing and incredible, but also really important, I think, from a consumer's perspective as well as a taxpayer's perspective. In order to build renewable projects today, it has to be financeable. And a big part of making sure you can finance a project, a renewable energy project, is making sure there's demand for it. So having the federal government leading the charge and needing that kind of power is significant in terms of trying to get things built. I think today, the costs have come down significantly on renewables, and we were having a conversation earlier about solar is sort of taking off like wildfire, and I'm sure Shawn's going to speak to this too, but as it comes to the costs have come down over time, and I think that's really because we've had a little bit of it takes a village approach, between tax credits, both the state and federal level, loan guarantees, being better at trying to figure out how to finance these projects, and more importantly, now figuring out, we've streamlined how to do PPAs and offtake agreements in a way that makes a lot of sense, and it's almost a no-brainer today. I mean, it's a big difference from today and where it was even in 2008. So I think ultimately the taxpayer and the consumers are going to be the big winners as a result of this executive order. Okay, very good. So let's turn to you, Shawn. You head up sustainability efforts for the nation's largest utility. We heard strategic partnership as a phrase that's used and been successful in the Navy. Tell us more, what role does the private sector have in developing, financing, deploying these renewable energy investments? And I'm interested in discussing more some of these new business models that are emerging. We have one, GW and Duke Energy signed a big solar deal you might want to talk about. So tell us a little bit more about it.
Good. So, reflecting on this morning thus far, I think the good news, at least from my perspective, is that the private sector is, or at least should be, very encouraged to support you in your sustainability efforts within the federal government. There was reference earlier today to the federal government as the largest energy user in the United States in aggregate. So there's a tremendous business opportunity there for the private sector. I think one of the greatest challenges, and John and others can certainly relate to this, is that if you think about the United States, it's really a patchwork quilt of energy policies, energy rules, markets, and solutions around energy efficiency and renewable energy. So there's unfortunately not a one-size-fits-all solution. So, Frank made a reference earlier today to storytelling. So Amit told me I only have a few minutes, so I'll tell a very few short stories. And the first story is the story of energy efficiency. And I know there's a panel this afternoon that will focus on energy efficiency. But I'd be remiss if I didn't at least acknowledge what's happened within our industry as it relates to energy efficiency. If you think about the first wave of EE in the late 1970s, there was traction, certainly there was traction, but things really never took off, never took hold in a meaningful way. And why is that? So the regulatory model really didn't enable incentives to be aligned in a way that put investor-owned utilities in a position where they could promote and advance energy efficiency programs to the benefit of both customers and shareholders. So if you think about a traditional commercial enterprise, it's an unnatural thing to ask your customers to consume less of your product. That's just not the way you think about a business model when shareholders are involved. So to the credit of many policymakers across the United States at the state level, many state commissions and general assemblies redid the incentive models to allow utilities like Duke Energy, when we pursue energy efficiency and demand-side management programs, to have an incentive built into those, which puts us in a position where we can aggressively promote and market and pursue those programs. And our shareholders should feel just as excited about that as if we were to build conventional power plants and put iron in the ground, so to speak. So when I think about Duke Energy in particular, and the reason that we've seen such a tremendous growth in energy efficiency in the last few years, it really is because of decisions made in the policy arena. And from a federal government perspective, there's no question in my mind that energy efficiency oftentimes is a great first place to start. And I think the executive order even makes reference to that. So efficient lighting, efficient HVAC, and other equipment. I encourage you to reach out to your incumbent utility providers, identify what types of programs they may have for you, importantly, to secure incentives that can either defray or eliminate the upfront costs associated with many energy efficiency ideas, which may have a great business case, but if there's an upfront cost that's an impediment, look to your local utility provider to hopefully provide you a solution. Thinking about renewable energy more specifically. And Duke Energy is not alone in this regard, but we have a number of first-of-a-kind projects that are in play today. So here we are on the campus of George Washington University. Last year, Duke Energy signed a deal with George Washington and American University to provide a 52-megawatt solar facility under a unique arrangement, first-of-a-kind arrangement that will allow George Washington University and American University to procure more than half of their energy needs from solar power. I think that's very significant, that's meaningful. So how did it happen? It started with the vision. It started with a set of priorities. And I know that GW and American University both have carbon neutral goals. Goals like that matter because goals like that align resources internally, focus attention on important areas, and it gets people thinking creatively about what types of solutions can we find that can help us meet that goal. So I'm pleased that Duke Energy was able to step in, build a facility in North Carolina which will put power onto the grid that will feed the DC marketplace here, and give GW an opportunity to really move in the direction of carbon neutrality. So once again, policy is a lot of what enabled this in terms of incentives and credits and open markets and the like, which gave GW an opportunity to do something that is cost effective. So I think one of the recurring themes for all of these energy efficiency and renewable energy projects is, for the private sector, these provide a return on investment that's attractive. And for the government sector or for academia, it provides an opportunity to do one of two things, and in some cases both: reduce costs or reduce price volatility. And in the case of the arrangement that was struck with GW and American University, it will achieve both of those objectives. Thinking about the Navy, switching to my next small story. So another first-of-a-kind project for Duke Energy, Camp Lejeune in the eastern part of North Carolina. We're in the process of building a 13-megawatt solar facility on the base grounds for Camp Lejeune. So once again, first time we've ever entered into an arrangement like this. This will be part of our regulated portfolio. So for us, it meets a compliance obligation. And for the Navy, it's an opportunity to have an energy security initiative right there on the base itself. So 5-10 years ago, that sort of project would not have been possible. But the economics work today, and the policy environment in North Carolina made it possible. So one other quick vignette that I would mention would be Duke Energy has a major stake in a company based in California called REC Solar. So REC Solar specializes in commercial scale renewable energy projects in the range of 100 kilowatts to 5 megawatts. They have a number of projects under their belt with the federal government, primarily the Veterans Administration, And most of these have been, to date, appropriations projects, but there is some experience with performance contracts. I think that financing, innovative financing, to me is the key, not just for the federal government, but for a lot of our customers, because capital is constrained, and oftentimes it's very hard for any entity to find the resources to make the full upfront investment. So with performance contracts and other innovative financing vehicles, I think that's obviously a tremendous opportunity for the federal government to really jumpstart a lot of these efforts. Thanks.
All right. Well, thanks for all that. I think that laid a really good foundation. We'll start more of a discussion phase now and then turn to some Q&A from the audience and from the live stream. So we heard buy it, book it, build it. That's a great summary. If I read the executive order right, they want to build it before you buy it and book it. So is there a tension there, or is this part of a larger strategy? You should try all of these techniques. You want to start with you, Tim, and come down the line?
I like the buy it, book it, build it. I hadn't heard that before.
Yeah.
That's great. I think that you do have to take all the strategies and lay them on the table to figure out which avenues are going to provide you with the most success. Again, it's not so much that one is better in a particular location or time frame. It's you may find procurement officers more comfortable with one over the other. You may find sites more comfortable with one over the other, and you may find that the market is more comfortable with one over the other. And so it's not going to be that one is going to be better than the other. I think they all have their merit of those pathways. And again, those are all procurement pathways.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Beth.
Well, I can't really speak to procurement from the federal government side, but I can say from the, private side that, in addition to all these innovative financing models and however, the different agencies want to go about it, I mean, there are so many other things that are going on that are going to create such opportunity and make it so much easier for us to get renewable projects built. Including things like regulations that have already gone into effect, like the mercury rule, where you're already starting to see some fuel switching, but more importantly, the Clean Power Plan, which we expect to see finalized and come out this summer. So, as the states have very aggressive targets and the utilities are going to move, Shawn can speak more to this, but move to meet those targets, it's just going to create a whole plethora of renewable projects that'll make it just that much easier, I think, for the federal government to procure.
So our three models, buy it, book it, build it, it's a real catchy way so guys like me can remember all the models, but each of the model has its place, like Tim was saying, and it depends on the availability of land, the type of renewable energy technology you want to employ, and most importantly, the regulatory environment that exists that governs how we buy electricity. So in the southwest of the United States, the buy it model works great because we have limited land and it's a deregulated environment, so we could do it there. In the southeast, where we've got a great project with Camp Lejeune, the book it model works best because of the regulatory environment. And then finally, the buy it model works great where we have land and where the economics support us building it on the base, and of course where we have the demand for electricity. So each of our projects around the globe is very different, and one of those three models fits so that we can meet our goal of integrating renewable energy into our electric supply for the purpose of energy security.
Great.
I think the only thing I would add would just be to reinforce that customers generally want choice and flexibility, and in some instances they may want to have both the facility and the RECs located on their premises. In other instances, they may not care where the facility is constructed, but they want the power and they want the renewable energy certificates, and in other scenarios they may just want the RECs themselves. So I think it's helpful to have a portfolio of options, and to John's point, a lot of that really is driven by a very diverse regulatory environment across the United States today. So I think that's a situation we'll find ourselves in for some time to come.
Good, okay. So that was very helpful. I think we have over 50 agencies listening, and the message is, figure out your options, and there are options, and you can take it, and you can decide what works best for you. All right, let's spend a couple minutes talking about infrastructure. So it's literally how we have to fit all this together. We had the QER came out, the Quadrennial Energy Review from the administration, focused very extensively on our infrastructure, frankly, deficits in our country and what we'll need to do if we want to see this clean energy future. So how important is infrastructure in what you're looking at? And I want to integrate into that discussion storage, if you guys are looking into storage as part of getting to meeting this executive order. And I'll just throw it open to whoever has some words to say here. Go ahead, John.
So I'm going to share something with you guys, but don't tell anybody what I'm about to tell you, all right? Largely, the electrical infrastructure on the Navy and Marine Corps bases are circa 1950, 1960, and have trouble accepting the renewable energy. And so that's why this 1 gigawatt goal is hugely important. And so we're working now to upgrade our infrastructure to accept the renewable energy and to incorporate storage with that. And so one of the things that we're working on with Southern Company is how can we create an environment where we look forward to when storage is going to be economical in the Southeast and incorporate that into the deals. And so the key is the partnership. We're doing a similar thing in California to try and figure out how can we integrate the storage. And as the storage costs come down and as we focus on how are we going to upgrade our base infrastructure, then we'll find the sweet spot where we can do that. But we certainly are at the point where we're upgrading our infrastructure now to integrate the renewable energy in an effective way.
Great.
So I think infrastructure kind of has a lot of different connotations. So the infrastructure in a federal facility, clearly if you have old equipment, there's an opportunity for efficiency. Back to my original stance that you first work on efficiency and then you get the renewable to come in behind that. But when it comes to the infrastructure, if you think about a lot of what we're talking about are very large installations. There are also a lot of opportunities for smaller installations across the federal government. There's a lot of agencies that don't have single location, large buildings that they can go install this at, but they have a lot of smaller dispersed sites. And the infrastructure has to be in place for that installation as well. And frankly, because solar is a common application, there's roof structures, the ability for the roof to handle this, the site electrical connections, and then the ability for the utility to be able to integrate this into their system, because the utility has to be concerned about small or large renewable, that is a generation site out on their system.
Great.
If I can make just
Okay,
one comment on that. So for our industry, storage, of course, would be considered the holy grail to try and really ramp up renewable energy. And if you think about one of the greatest challenges for renewable energy and why, from a capability perspective, it's not always an apples-to-apples comparison to compare it to some of the conventional resources is because of the inability to tell a solar facility when it's going to run, or the inability to tell those facilities tell us when they're going to run based on the sunshine. So storage is obviously an area of great interest, and it's not ready for prime time yet. But if there's anything we've learned, and I was having this conversation with someone earlier today. I mean, think about telecommunications and the advancements that have been made in technology. And 10 or 15 years ago, things that you couldn't imagine doing with the phone that you keep in your pocket, and what's possible today. So I'm always reluctant to say I can predict exactly how fast energy storage will advance, but I'm certain that it will. And one benefit, if you think about the Navy and other military installations with storage, is the opportunity to truly have a complementary system of renewable resources and energy storage, which can provide a great energy security profile for a particular facility. Residential users are interested in it, certainly. If a residential customer has aspirations to go fully off the grid, then rooftop solar today alone won't provide them that opportunity. But if they were to couple that with an energy storage system, maybe it could at some point in the future. So right now, generally speaking, you don't see storage in the marketplace with some exceptions. The PJM market, I believe, has some ancillary services where storage can provide some frequency benefits to that marketplace. But we're still early in that game. I'm not sure exactly how fast it will take for it to play out, but it's coming. There's no question about it.
Great. What I say? Regulation is the mother of all invention. So I think as we see more regulation come down the pike here, like we're going to see storage ramp up. Like I think it's going to move forward quickly.
Okay, good. All right, let's try and weave in some of the questions that we've gotten submitted from the audience. And one of the first ones, we touched on procurement a couple times in some of your answers. So the question here is a little in the weeds, but I think it's important. And the question is, procurement is one of the biggest challenges we face, and are there plans to train contracting and finance personnel on PPAs and ESPCs on all of these initiatives? Because this person's view is that we are continually hitting a wall when it comes to sharing this kind of information laterally. So are there initiatives in that space, or something going on, or something planned?
So the Federal Energy Management Program has a very extensive training program where we offer training on all of those different subjects through online courses as well as in-person courses. And if we're talking about training, I get a chance to promote my Energy Exchange coming up in August for federal agencies to attend. That is a 10-track training, a 3-day event of just solid training to train on these subjects to help us achieve the goals that would all apply towards the new executive order. So training is a key part of it. But also on the other side of these processes is to try to make them simpler and more understandable. One of the slogans that we've adopted in performance contracting, one of the more complex acquisitions that we go through in the procurement phases, is we say we want to make that more business as usual. In that, how do we streamline that, make it more standardized so that people don't guess or are not sure about it and just wonder? Because when they wonder, it adds a sense of doubt and uncertainty. And in the federal government, doubt and uncertainty slows down projects. And so if we can remove the doubt and uncertainty and make it clear how the process works through solid, standardized process and procedure and through project structures, that will help us out. And so that business as usual is one of the things we strive for.
And so if someone in the audience from an agency they go to your website?
They can come to our website, they can email me, and we'll get them in touch with our training program. We have an extensive set of courses. You'll probably find them on your own, but if you need help, certainly contact us. We're happy to get you connected with those.
Okay, great. All right, so we had another theme in some of these questions, and it really has to do with policy, but it's not this executive branch policy, but it's what Congress is going to do. So a couple things come up is what role does appropriations have in this process? You mentioned if, you can go, it's easy to do the ones that save you money, but if there's stuff that's more expensive, do you need additional appropriations, or is it going to eat out of existing? There is a long-term contracting authority, but there's some legislation pending right now in Congress that will allow long-term contracts. There's also an issue that near to dear to my heart, because we've done a lot of analysis on this, on the investment tax credit. And obviously the public sector can't take that, but when you guys do projects, that greatly changes the economics with a 30% investment tax credit that's expiring next year for solar energy. So we talk about any of those issues and how they relate. Beth.
So I think things are a little crazy on Capitol Hill. I think that even 6 weeks ago, we thought we would see a full appropriations process move forward, and even that seems a little unlikely at this point. But all that does is create greater uncertainty for folks in the federal government. And frankly, for folks in the private sector who are looking to the federal government to be doing business, with whom to be doing business. Look, the investment tax credit, the production tax credits, those things have been incredibly helpful in terms of getting renewable projects done. And in fact, like I said, the landscape has changed so significantly even since 2008 in terms of the amount of wind and solar generation that's come online. And it is a combination of everything from loan guarantees, ITC, but we're almost to the point where these projects are going to be self-sufficient and they're not going to need those incentives. And so much so that you have some of the major wind developers like NextEra saying, we are okay with a phase out of the tax credit. Let's just phase it out. I think there are still a number of folks in Congress who would just like to eliminate it totally, which is unfortunate. But I think if we can figure out a way to get us to a phase out, and it's a very short phase out, 3-4 years, that will allow a fair amount of generation to still come online, get those incentives, and hopefully continue to reduce the costs of that energy.
For us, it's been interesting as we talk to the utility companies and development communities about building these projects. we have a very short-term goal to hit 1 gigawatt by this coming December. And so the expiration of the ITC actually helps us because we have a short-term goal and the community has a short-term goal, the development community and the utility companies have a short-term goal. So that spurs action. If that ITC was going out there for a much longer period of time and we had a longer time to meet our goal, by gosh, we would take that time. And because we have to get it done by this December, and the ITC, for example, with Duke was going to expire, I think, this coming December in order to take advantage of the state tax credits, it forced us to open a dialogue, keep the dialogue open, and close the deal. And so I'm thankful for that because we've hit the sweet spot. Another dynamic that I think it's important to consider is what is the renewable portfolio standards going to look like in the states. And what we're seeing is as these renewable portfolio standards ratchet up, it's going to create a whole new market and open up additional opportunities after the ITC expires. And in states like Virginia, where there's a goal, a mandate to hit it, that is bringing utility companies to the table to open up a dialogue with us that's creating additional opportunity.
Great. Okay.
Yeah, I guess the only thing I would add, these incentives are always a political hot potato. There's no question about that. And it's unfortunate because for the marketplace, that uncertainty, that churn can put a chill on the marketplace from times where you have this on again, off again approach to the incentives. But I would kind of echo Beth's comment that I don't think a cliff effect for any type of incentive is really a smart policy approach. I think it's, even if there is a gradual phase out, it's helpful to identify those as far in advance as possible so everyone understands what the off-ramp looks like. And to John's point, the incentives are things that need to be looked at from time to time because there's so many variables in the marketplace that are changing. The economics of these underlying technologies have changed dramatically, just dramatically in the past 3 to 5 years with solar in particular. If you think about the price points today compared to where we were a few years ago and where we thought we'd be, it's just tremendous to see what the economies of scale have done to that marketplace.
Great, thanks. Okay, so we have another question on, it's basically the same subject, but we haven't talked about it yet. We've been talking about clean energy for buildings, basically, electricity. Thermal is also, has a goal in the executive order. It's when you put thermal and electricity in your baseline, then it's a 25% goal. So let's talk about that and unpack what that means, or what is thermal and are people working on it and what are some of the solution sets there? Anyone? Tim?
So I think the thermal goal adds a new dimension to our ability to reduce our consumption and adds another avenue for federal agencies to meet the overall renewable energy goals that we have. We've long tracked thermal renewable energy, but we haven't actually had a goal associated with it. So this is new ground for us. And I think that the types of energy that is included in that overall reduction goal gives us a great opportunity to expand the sources of energy to combined heat and power, other alternative energy forms that will help the federal government move forward in its goals.
So under that alternative energy category, there are CHP you mentioned, fuel cells, modular nuclear reactors, carbon capture and storage. Is that, what do you guys feel about some of those we always talk about wind and solar sort of by default. Let's talk about what are the prospects for some of those other technologies. Is Duke looking at anything?
Go ahead, John.
So for us, the CHP technology is very attractive, and we're working some deals where we're looking at bringing in a CHP and incorporating that in a microgrid for the base. I see one of my shipmates from CNIC out in the audience that they've got a very interesting project for steam plant decentralization, which is an energy savings performance contract that's going to save us a bunch of money that's worked through FEMP that we're very excited about. So there's lots of opportunities out there that we're pursuing with Naval Facilities Engineering Command in the lead, working with the supported commands of CNIC and MCICO.
So on the thermal renewable energy, what I think that the really exciting part about that is we do talk a lot about wind or solar as our renewable, and we talked about the intermittency of those. When you combine that with some of these other technologies, you get a more stable form that gives us an overall clean energy approach to our sites. So by integrating the thermal, integrating that with the electrical renewable, we have, I think, a better result and a better solution towards helping us meet these goals.
I'd make one comment related to nuclear. My belief, and Duke Energy's belief, is that nuclear should play a vital role in the future energy supply for this country. If we think about our footprint today, our energy mix today, nuclear plays a sizable role. And as we think about continued retirements of coal plants and the emergence of renewable energy, those will help to decarbonize our fuel supply. But if we were to take all of the nuclear capacity that we have online today and replace it with natural gas combined cycle power plants, that would have a sizable increase in our carbon emissions for Duke Energy. So, the nuclear industry moves in a very methodical way, and I think that's a very good thing. Modular nuclear is something that we've been hearing about for a few years, and as the term, you might think it sounds like small nuclear power plants, and that's basically what it would be. That could be an opportunity for the industry because current economics for a new 2-unit nuclear power plant would be in the range of $10 billion or more. So that's a sizable investment that creates some challenges. And maybe modular nuclear is a way to pursue nuclear in a meaningful way in the future and in a creative, innovative way that can help us mitigate carbon emissions over time.
Okay, so we have some interim goals. We're talking about, a decade is not too long, but there's even goals in between in the executive order. So if you were a federal agency and you had to play a bit of catch up, now they're starting to read this text, what would you guys recommend some of the first steps to take for somebody who's maybe not as ahead of the game as, say, the Navy with their own goal?
Well, there are some agencies that do need to catch up. Some of them are very large that have to do a lot of catch up, and I think that doing an analysis of where they think that they're, form a plan, doing the analysis of their sites of where they think they have the opportunity, and then beginning to formulate the steps and the plan to accomplish those things. I know in smaller sites and throughout the federal government, the National Renewable Energy Laboratory has done a lot of work for FEM in something called a re-opt analysis. And the re-opt analysis goes into a facility or a building and helps determine what the proper mix of renewable energy is to make that site the appropriate installation. It takes into account the physical parameters of the renewable energy, but also the incentives that are available to help fund that renewable energy. And so that plan formation is the first step. And then frankly, following your plan is the next step, and finding the procurement pathways to make it work or the funding mechanisms to make it work.
And so what I would do, I'm an agency, I'm behind the power curve on this. The first thing you did, and much like Tim said, is you got to figure out fundamentally what your load and resource analysis is. How much power do you need? And then what kind of land do you have, and what kind of renewable energy technology can you accept and works? Overlay that with a market analysis of where the regulatory environment would support a particular procurement action, whether it's a power purchase agreement, a real estate out grant, or building it on your own base for your own use. So you've got to first determine how much can you take, your land, and your renewable energy, and the technology that you want to use. We used, or CNIC used NREL to do that study globally for CNIC, and it was very helpful in charting the way forward for us.
Okay. I got a set of questions, and a lot of them have to do with financing. It's come up a little bit, but maybe we can go into some of the specifics. So how does Agency X, who hasn't, maybe a little bit behind the curve, try and figure out this financing? So there's NREL can come in and help you. FEMP has some resources. What else is available? Will Duke come in and talk to federal agencies about what is possible, or other private sector? Where do you go if you're somebody, one of these 50 agencies?
So what we did was we started a dialogue. We went and met with every CEO of the utility company and a number of the development communities and gathered information and tried to understand what worked, so that we could develop an acquisition model that worked for the third party that was going to finance what we were trying to get. And that was key, is just open up the communication and figure out what the structure is that would work. Another useful agency is the Power Marketing Administrations, WAPA, PJM, ERCOT. Have a discussion with these guys and see what works in the area where you want to employ the renewable energy technology.
So I think that that's probably the exact path for a very large system, which is the type that you would be looking at. For medium or smaller systems, your best bet is probably to work through my program and talk to a federal project executive. We maintain a regional approach to federal project executives. They provide information about how the financing works, what types of programs are available, and what the process would be to start making it happen. Those generally result in more of the utility energy service contracts and performance-based contracts of ESPC, but those also can provide information on power purchase agreements as well and get us in the right, get them in contact with the right people to help them move forward. When you're talking about the very large installations, your plan is exactly right. Go talk to the power authorities, go work with the finance industry directly, because you're dealing with something much larger than you're going to be using a third party. You're going to go directly to them.
So I think people are looking for some examples of the on-site, and specifically, people get the PPA and you sign up and that's fine, but agencies, or through these questions I'm gathering, like what's some models they can use of how do you do something that's not solar on your roof, for example? What are some models there that they might want to think about?
Did you say how do you use something that's not solar?
Not solar, not an ESPC. What other models are there?
Well, there are certainly agency appropriated monies, which are harder and harder to come by. And frankly, I think it's probably a little bit hard to justify just using appropriations to go out and make a purchase of that nature. If you're going to put a small solar on a rooftop, or a small something on your rooftop that is a renewable energy, I think that your best avenue right now is going to be a power purchase agreement, or going directly with an energy savings performance contract or a utility energy service contract to make that happen. For most agencies, not DOD, DOD has a special ability to go on a much longer term to make a power purchase agreement. Most agencies are limited to a 10-year term, which isn't often adequate to make those fund. And so an energy savings performance contract or a utility energy service contract tends to be the best avenue to get that to happen for a smaller system that would fit on a roof.
No, I
Tell us
completely agree.
what's the most innovative thing that you see the Navy doing, that you think is really cool out of, you have all this array of projects that might be a model for the future?
Of the three models that we have, probably the most innovative that we got is the off-base power purchase agreement. And while we haven't closed the deals on any of them, it gives you an opportunity to explore a wide range of renewable energy technologies and bring that into your installation or your agency without having to give up any land and supplement or exchange what you're using as brown power for renewable energy. So that's probably the most innovative. And while we have special authorities under 10 USC 2922A, there are some ways to make the economics work with a 10-year power purchase agreement that's off your installation, much like you guys did at GW.
So to follow on that, because it relates to the question, I get also a sense that agents feel this is going to cost them, like to reach these goals, and it's not to say it's not an unfunded mandate, but they're convince the audience and some people out there that the economics work, and that this is not a burden on them, and this can help the overall budget situation. Everybody's facing tight budgets.
I think, as we just heard, though, your plan is to make sure that you put the power on the sites that is equal to or less than the cost that you have. So in a long-term cost cycle, life cycle cost cycle approach, we're looking for economical solutions that equal or lower our cost. Certainly, every time you do something, you tend to have some sort of an upfront cost that goes with it, but the overall financial situation is positive for the agency and for the government when we move forward on these projects. That's the structure, and that's part of the requirements that we have to meet when we do these averages.
And I think that, I would say if you were to look at a heat map of the United States that shows where all of this project development work has occurred, I mean, you would see these clusters and concentrations, and that demonstrates that the economics of these projects is very geographic dependent. And in certain scenarios, you have tax incentives, and you have prevailing utility rates that can range from anywhere from 5 cents a kilowatt hour to 30 cents a kilowatt hour, which can dramatically impact the ability to achieve that life cycle cost-effective threshold. So, as you're thinking about your portfolios that in many instances cover the entire United States, I think there will be obvious areas to start.
And we're going to hit our goal without using appropriated funds or increasing our utility costs, because my friends at CNIC won't let us. And we shouldn't. We don't have to. And the utility company, our partner, is going to work with us to achieve those goals, because they have the same goal that we have, because they can't increase the cost for their rate base either. So working together, we certainly can do that. And I would encourage you to, even if you're a small agency, a small installation, talk to your utility company. They'll be happy to work with you. There's another contract that you can use, is the UESC that we didn't talk about, that is another great tool that you can use in targeting your utility partner.
So talk about that a little more, because there is some questions about utilities, a bit of a perception that utilities might not be the best willing partners on this stuff.
No, you're a big customer of the utility, and the utility, especially in the regulated environment, wants to make sure they keep your business, because the seas are changing in the regulated environment. So they're going to make sure that they provide you good customer service. I have not really found a situation where they didn't want to work with us. They're going to try within their rule set to get you what you want.
Yeah, the utilities are very cooperative with agencies wanting to make these progresses. Utility energy service contracts are a key example of that. We host a twice yearly meeting called the Federal Utility Partnership Working Group, where agencies, utilities, other private companies come together and we talk about these issues and we work together to come up with the solutions. Utilities are taking the stance that they want to be a full-service energy provider to their customer base. They recognize that they have to be that type of full-service provider in order to maintain their customer base going forward. They want to be involved in their customers' business and helping them with their whole energy needs. So they're very cooperative and very helpful, and we've found great progress with working with utilities through utility energy service contracts.
Full service
Well,
provider?
it's a mixed bag. I mean, it depends on what jurisdiction you're in. Just to say that again. So we have certain jurisdictions that have renewable portfolio standards. There are certain utilities that have commercial renewable energy arms that are outside and independent from their regulated operations. So depending on the particular jurisdiction where you're at, you may encounter different scenarios and different opportunities for the utility to provide you with solutions. There may be situations where you knock on a door and you don't get a very responsive answer. But I think there is a push within the industry, an industry that recognizes that the entire value chain for our business is changing, and there's more and more activity occurring behind the meter in terms of energy efficiency and distributed energy resources than we've ever seen before. So for companies like Duke Energy, we recognize that is an opportunity for us to expand our business lines and try and identify and partner and collaborate with customers that now are expressing a great demand for some innovative solutions in these areas.
All right. Well, thank you very much. That was a great discussion, and please join me in thanking the panel.